All right, welcome to today. We have an important topic today, which I wanted to cover the severity of this importance of this topic. And I don't think we'd never mentioned it before prior to this, maybe loosely, but I wanted to dedicate a whole good 10, 20 minutes about it just because it's very important. Just because it came up today. And we have a deal going on in El Campo, which is by Houston. And we do a lot of stuff with agents. So one of the ways that one of the topics that's a very utmost importance when you're dealing with agents and just in general is disclosures. Disclosures. We did not learn this at first. We learned this the hard way by trying to do not necessarily sneaky stuff that was against the law, but just not disclosing. Disclosures prevent you from getting slapped on the wrist, prevents you from losing deals, prevents you from losing money. And there's a lot of different forms of disclosure. So disclosure that came up today was on Alan's deal that we're working right now, and we are essentially under contract to purchase, but we disclosed, and now it is coming out to be in our favor that we disclosed. And I want to cover this from A to Z. If you guys have any questions, put in the chat. Let me open up my chat here so I can see. What happened is you disclose to prevent yourself from getting slapped in the wrist or losing the deal. And if it's a big enough deal, people get jealous and they want to try and foil your deal. Who here? This is a good one. Who here has lost a deal because you didn't disclose? Let's start off right there. In some way, shape, or form, you didn't disclose. Maybe you're wholesaling the property and you lost a deal. I've done that prior to this, early in my career when I was alone. But yeah, I've lost deals. But Alan says happened before. If you've been doing real estate, you've lost a deal because you did not disclose something.
Probably once at the very beginning.
All right, so this one, what happens is that agents, they love to foil deals. They love the opportunity to foil deals. Same thing with other wholesalers or other buyers. They love the opportunity to foil opportunity, and that's what happened today. Someone tried to call our listing agent because we buy less and stuff at the MLS, but we disclosed. So they called our listing agent and they said, "Hey, whoever your buyer is, I don't know if they have it under contract, but if they do, they're trying to wholesale your property." Was that the epitome of this conversation, Alan? I didn't hear about the conversation. I heard about it through Alan. So, Alan, if you want to talk about this is good.
Yeah, sure. So I was just, following up with the agent, trying to get some more info about the survey. And then he's just like, hey, somebody called me actually about you guys pre-marketing the parcels. And, they were just trying to, show that you guys were like trying to wholesale or some. He's like, but, we talked about it. So I understand you guys are going to pre-market and, yeah, we're completely okay with it. But I just thought I'd let you know. It's kind of funny. Somebody called like a couple of days after we went under contract. And yeah, so it's just crazy people do that.
See,
What's funny is he said, well, let me know if they back out. I'm a buyer. And this thing has been listed on the MLS for 6 months. And that's what he said. And that's ridiculous. It just shows that, we have a good property and that we know what we're doing. And, people are just jealous and want to jump on the train.
Everybody's a buyer when they know you got something good. No, it was definitely eye opening. And one thing that we've done is we ask for a lot of disclosures when we contract properties, and that's one of the things we go through on purpose when we're contracting a property is disclosures. Hey, is it okay if we pre-market the property? We're going to subdivide this property. It's going to take something. Can we put signs up? Can we put it on the MLS? Can we show the property? Is it okay if we do showings without you being there? Like, we ask for all these disclosures. We tell them what we're going to do, A to Z, start to finish, and then it's no surprise when we do it. It's not a surprise when we do it. So it protects you as a buyer, and it protects your potential buyers in the back end, because what we provide is product to the marketplace that would never have been there if it wasn't for us. So we have to disclose to our buyers, hey, this is the subdivide. We're going to close the project out, and we're going to sell you 10 acres off this larger purchase project property. And that's how you're going to get your 10 acres or 20 acres, whatever it's going to be. So we have to disclose to buyers. We have to disclose to sellers. We have to disclose to everybody of what's going on. And this is the point where you're better off oversharing, especially in real estate transactions that has multiple six figures involved with all parties. You're better off sharing too much information than not enough, because if you don't share enough, it's going to end up bad. And even to the point where whenever we contract properties, we ask, "Hey, is there anything I need to know about this property that would prevent me from buying it?" You ask those things on the front end as a buyer. Yeah, it has no utilities, it has no road frontage. Oh, I don't have a survey. I need to get an updated survey. Like you ask for those disclosures when you're buying too, as much as you want, because you're supposed them as a seller supposed to disclose everything that's up or could be up with it, and you as a buyer have to disclose everything that you're planning or wanting to do with the property. It is 100% legal to novate properties if you disclose to the seller that you're going to contract it and put it on MLS. 100% legal. But if you don't, it could be some form of fraud. you know? So it's understanding that. Junior asked, did the agent tell you the name of the person that called? I don't think so. I don't know if we don't want to put them on blast. But it could be anybody. Like there's so many potential people that could have called. It could have been anybody. I received a message the other day. They're like, you're selling these properties. I'm like, yeah, because I own it. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like,
I'm just asking because there's an idiot in Houston, and I actually have him as a friend on Facebook that's been emailing agents and doing the same thing. That's why I'm asking.
oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one of those things where as long as you disclose what you're doing and how you're doing it, you protect yourself and all parties. When you first start, you might not know what to ask or what to even disclose, but we've learned this through hard lessons. We've lost big transactions by not disclosing or asking direct questions. There's a recent transaction that where me and Anthony are always learning as we do more and more transactions. And something we didn't get was we we didn't ask for a release. So we do a lot of these subdivides. Essentially, if you buy 100 acres and you cut it into 10 tracts, if you get a cash buyer that buys that property, technically you have to have a lien release. Some sellers will not do a lien release. So if you're going with the intention of subdividing, make sure you ask, hey, if I bring you cash, will you give me a lien release? Very, very simple. But it's something that we've learned in the past. Not asking for that disclosure from the seller if we can get that lien release. So there's a lot of things. There's deals I bought solely on the fact that they gave us a lien release. Where if they wouldn't, I wouldn't have bought it. So there's a lot of things you need to ask when you're contracting, especially subdivides like this that are medium size. Like for instance, we have a deal closing it's like in the next week. It's like September 2nd, I believe. We have a deal closing next week. It's 30 acres. We told them we're pre-marketing the property. We got one buyer coming in to close. We're double closing them out, and we're bringing our own funds to knock out the rest of the purchase. So once you hey, sometimes what we'll do is we'll ask for a partial lien release and just close part of the transaction and continue the escrow. So there's ways to carry on a transaction and do a large transaction if you just ask for it. So we've done that. That's a good one. Alan was laughing at that one. Have you done that one, Alan, before? No. Okay. So I'll explain a little bit better. So what happens is, let's say hypothetically, this is a good one for everybody here. If you're broke and don't have private money and you want to do a big deal, this is how you do it. All right. Everybody taking notes. So what you do, let's say it's 30 acres like that tract we're closing next week. Hypothetically, if you get one buyer to close, you're buying at a certain price per acre, so you can negotiate with the seller as long as everybody knows what you're doing. You should have already disclosed that you're pre-marketing the property and selling it off. When you get a buyer on the hook, hey, can I close out 10 acres, 20 acres, whatever that is, whatever that buyer's buying at X price per acre, and I'll give you the X price cash per acre. Well, if it's 5,000 an acre and you're buying 15 acres, that's 75,000. Hey, can I give you $75,000 in cash next week and you sign a lien release and I'll give you $75,000. Well, can you make it 80? Absolutely. I might have sold that thing for 100 grand, 115 grand. Now I just got paid on that deal before I even completed the whole transaction. And I lien released that part of the property. Seller got paid, I got paid, and I'm continuing to subdivide chunk by chunk. And that's just asking for a lien release, no money lender involved. You just ask for a release for that section of the property. Hopefully you did your surveys prior to that and you already have that ready to go, and you can cut that 30 acres down to 10 or 15, whatever that acreage is, and you pay them off whatever price point per acre you contracted at. And that's a way to do a deal and get paid intermittently while doing the transaction. Now, one thing we're diving into is if we can get a certain amount of sales on a tract, we're trying to bring private money in to close that transaction out as soon as possible, because if you stall out a deal, your buyers could fall off, your seller could fall off. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen, and we have plenty of conversations like that. We have a deal that we did. We negotiated such great terms. She ghosted us for 2 years, but we filed the lawsuit against her, so we still have our original terms. But she ghosted us for 2 years. What's the cost of doing that for that so long? Doing that for so long, you know what I mean? That was one deal we negotiated. It was like no money down, 5,000 a month for I think for like 24 months, and it was a crazy deal. But she realized what she signed and she didn't want to close. So you want to close transactions out as soon as possible, whenever they're ready to sign. So that's the big thing. Let me see here. So disclosures, asking for the right things, knowing what to ask for, being creative, and just asking. I say this all the time. So I grew up very in a biblical household, and if you, there's a verse, if you don't ask, you won't receive. I forget the whole verse. It's been a while. I'm rusty, but if you don't ask, you won't receive. So I'm very open to the opinion of asking, and you never know what you're going to receive other end. You never know what terms you're going to receive. You never know what a seller's going to do, what a buyer's going to do. Ask and shall receive. There you go. Steven got me. I'm a little rusty these days, but I still believe that theory. And people ask me a lot of stuff, and I was like, hey, I'll give it to you for whatever that may be. In some instances, just because you asked. You have not because you asked them. It's another verse. Thank you, Carla. Yeah, 100%. And I think this business is built off of that asking. The asking. You don't know if you don't know what they'll say yes to if you don't ask. So I think me and Anthony had a podcast that just came out. I think it was either yesterday or Friday, but we talk about how to find unicorn deals, and it's just asking. You ask for crazy terms, and you get crazy terms if you ask enough people, and that's it. That is all the sauce. Is just asking the right questions and following up. Yeah, disclosures. Any you have a question about disclosures? Anybody?
Yeah, I got one.
Hit me.
What are a couple that are I guess you could say crucial for every deal?
For every deal, I would say if you're doing a subdivide, verify you have a lien release. I would disclose that you're subdividing. I would disclose that you're pre-marketing. A lot of wholesalers, they'll contract stuff and then they'll market, and they're always like, I hope they'll target buyers that don't live in the same state because they're going to pre-market it and they don't want the buyer to find out. Just tell the buyer you're going to market it. I have partner buyers that may want a chunk of this or want to buy it from me. Is it okay if I pre-market it? Well, as long as I get X, absolutely. You know, a lot of times people, I think especially land sellers, they understand how the game works to an extent, and they're okay to the process because we just talked to a seller. I think it was Kyle here recently. They've been trying to sell their property for over 2 years. Land is like that. People can struggle to sell their property for years and years and years and years. And then here comes Hive Mind or Easy Land USA, and they come negotiate some crazy terms and they just disclose. I'm like, yeah, I mean, as long as I can get X, I'm good, whatever X may be. So it's one of those things where I think the price and that you're pre-marketing the properties is very, very important. At what point do you make disclosures? Oh, very, very good question, Steven. Very good question. I make disclosures before I even write the contract. I tell people exactly what I'm going to do, either while I'm writing the contract or before I send the contract. A lot of times, sellers be like, "Oh," or agents will be like, just write up the offer," and I'm like, I don't even know if they'll accept it. Why am I going to waste time drafting up a contract? Just ask if they'll sell their finance. well, no. Well, what if we put 100K down or 200K down? Well, they might be open to that. Well, okay. A lot of times you have to work yourself through the agent, and the agent says no to everything. So sometimes you do have to draft the contract, but usually we're asking for some type of disclosures up front. Hey, is it okay if we pre-market the property? And that's usually after we come to an agreeable price. We'll negotiate, do the verbal terms. Hey, is it okay if we market the property while we're under contract? Here's this disclosure and AB in the exhibit. Can we put signage on the property? Can we list on MLS? Can we do clearing? We just did this on a property. We asked if we can cut some trees down and do some land clearing to make it nicer. So you can't just go on somebody's property and start cutting down trees, especially not while you're under contract. But if you disclose, you can. So what do you do when they say no, not okay with marketing? Generally, it depends on the project, and it depends on the size of the project too. Most of the time, I don't know if we've heard a no yet, but generally we tell them that we're subdividing, and they're usually okay with us marketing it once we tell them we're subdividing, because most of these old access, yes, access, Edward says access is important. Once we tell them we're subdividing, most of them are privy to the game and they just don't want to deal with it. So they'll let us market the property to find buyers. And we tell them too, is like, hey, once we get a certain amount of buyers, we're going to close this thing out. It doesn't matter. We'll close. And we have the track record that we're going to close. So it's having the confidence that we're going to do the deal and they're going to get their result no matter what. And usually they're okay with it, with whatever terms or disclosures we may set, because they know when they know we're going to buy. So part of our asset to the marketplace is we sell liquid land. It's so funny. I had an agent hit me up on Twitter, and side note, I just closed our first deal from Twitter last week. Lead came from Twitter, and we bought it last week, and we're selling a 2-acre lot in Florida. But that came from Twitter. Shout out to Twitter here. But yeah, usually when you disclose, you're not going to have any issues what and how you're doing it, especially if they're once they understand what you're doing it, how you're going to do it, how you're going to get them their price, they're usually okay with it. Like I had a lead come in today from somebody, and they told me listed on the market for over a year. The seller did not want to get paid in cash in full. They literally wanted a seller finance offer because they didn't want to pay taxes. And I'm like, those deals are out there. We just bought a deal, I want to say in July. Same reason. They don't want to pay taxes. So they got a full price offer with terms. So if you can find those buyers out there, those are the guys that you're going to get seller financing on, because they do not want to pay taxes. Taxes are the enemy. Good questions, though.
Hey, Daniel, before we get off the subject, this is just a slight tweak on this here, but I have got a question about, I was talking to somebody just a few hours ago about novations, and they go, well, what happens if, say, for instance, you're buying at 500,000, you're going to put $100,000 into a road, and then you're going to, market the whole project for a little over $1 million, split the profits with the owner. What if things don't sell as expected? What typically happens with your contract, and you've already put $100,000 into it, things aren't selling quite like you thought they were going to? I guess what type of safeguards are you putting in your contract so that, I guess, what's your exit look like?
That's a tough question. I don't think I would go too hard into the paint on a deal like that. I wouldn't go into like hardcore development, especially putting in a road on a project. I've done culverts, I've done some land clearing, I've done fences, I've done water lines. I've done a lot of that stuff. And I'm okay with doing that because I know my numbers to an extent, and I'm not jumping too forward into a project that I'm not very confident in my numbers. So generally, you have to have that conversation, and it's a hard conversation to have, in my opinion, whoever that person it may be. They need to have that conversation of if they can be remedied in some way, shape, or form for improvements. If not, they just have to take a loss. And they can disclose that in the beginning. Hey, if numbers don't pan out, can we have a separation agreement or whatever? And that's something I hope you do now for whoever that person does from here on out. They might have a separation agreement, but sometimes you have to eat it. And that's why I try not to go too hard in the paint on properties I don't own.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Separation agreement, just to kind of finalize if things don't happen the way what happens then. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, like, I don't want to go through that because it just makes that makes the if the opportunity is partnership, I may do a separation agreement. But if I'm coming in as a buyer, I'm just gonna take that L because I don't want to muddy that conversation with the seller if and when I need to contract it. Like if the seller's super chill and you can get a separation agreement and all that stuff, I mean, more power to you. But in most of these cases, you're coming in like, hey, can I cut the grass? And the seller's like, yeah, of course you can cut the grass. Like I'll pay for it. Okay. Like if you put it that way, you're going to get a lot of yeses. If you tell them like, hey, can I cut the grass and cut some trees and send you the bill? They're gonna be like, no. you know, and it's gonna be one of those things where it depends on each transaction. I'm sure there's gonna be some transaction in the future, and it's gonna be super chill, and we might do that. But in most cases, the money we're going into it, it's I don't want to fight the seller on it if I send them an invoice. Like for instance, we just did a deal. We're doing a deal right now. The seller agreed. It was part of their. Usually, we pay for surveys. We pay for the boundary survey. We pay for the subdivision survey. We do pay for all that in the negotiations with the seller. So I was like, I'll pay for a boundary survey, half of it. Okay, I'll send you the invoice, and we paid for our half and he paid for his half. And I didn't expect him to do that, but he offered, so I took it. So I don't get that very often, but you do get stuff sometimes like that where they'll split the survey costs. They may pay for the survey. I think we did a deal recently where the seller paid for the whole survey. They didn't even call us, and usually we pay for that. So I don't know. Everything's negotiable, and if you can get it in writing, you can get it. We talk about asking. If you don't ask, you don't receive. So if you ask them to pay for half the cleanup and they say yes, I mean it is what it is. Half the survey, the whole survey. You can ask for anything you want through concessions, and I think a lot of people they might not know what to ask for, but you can literally ask for anything. I think I heard somebody we had a deal where there was a car in a barn, and we asked for the car in the barn just because what technically makes a contract innovation. I think the process of novation is we do a form of novation, but we do it through representing ourselves as a buyer. There's novation paperwork that you can file that gives you equitable interest, and you have the seller close to novation is a broad term. Like we do a form of novations through PSAs. So, and a part of it is that we disclose, hey, we're going to sell this in the 10-acre tracts and we're going to market the property. And if whatever we don't close, I will close the property and buy it cash. We just ask for a little bit of due diligence period to find at least one or two buyers to make sure the price is valuable at the exit price we're trying to cut this up at. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, perfect. Boom, novation, and that's through a PSA. So I know there's Corey Geary does Novation Nation. He does it through like back end paperwork that gives an equitable interest. I like doing it through PSAs, which are personal sale agreements. But there's a lot of ways to novate a property.
Hey Daniel,
Hit me.
on the last the lady who asked a question about what happens if the deal falls through, I wanted to say something about that.
Absolutely.
You can do it. You can do everything right. You can do all your homework. You can get all the best people involved, and you never really know what's going to happen until it hits the market. So one way to kind of cover yourself is to do a little marketing, and seeing what the market is like. Start running ads before you even put your earnest money down, and see if there's actually a market for that kind of property, for those size lots in that price range. If you start getting a bunch of hits, that's great news. If you don't, you might want to second guess, maybe pull back, maybe negotiate price. You never know, but before you dip your toes in the water, you can kind of check the temperature. So that's just one way to kind of cover yourself. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Mike. 100%. There, like I said, if you disclose, you get it in writing. It is what it is. But if you don't, you're gonna have to eat that cost in some way. Like I've heard of people buying houses, fixing them up, and then the dude never shows up at the closing table and they got a free and improved house. Stuff like that happens all the time. It's not going to stop happening. There's going to be people that they'll buy a sub 2, catch up the mortgage, and then they never move out. And now you paid for that person's mortgage and caught them up and brought them out of pre-foreclosure. They never moved out. I've seen that happen. Not that it happened to me, but I've seen it happen. There's just, like Mike says, you can do everything right and things can still go wrong. We're in the real estate game and there's a lot of moving parts and pieces and things that can and will go wrong in this game. And you just have to eat it. I was talking to one of my lenders about this recently because he's been in real estate for over 20 years. And we had a frank conversation about transactions. And I think it's okay to have that frank conversation with any lender. But essentially, we talked about, hey, what happens if things go bad? What's the remedy? What happens if you can't sell it at that price point? What's the remedy? A lot of times, your lenders want to know what the worst case scenario is and what's your remedy to the worst case scenario. So, luckily, but unluckily, I have a lot of experience with that. So I can show up case studies of when things go bad, what happens and what's the worst thing that can happen. I have a lot of experience with that. Not that I could put it on my chest. It hurts. It still hurts. We're still dealing with some of those situations, but you got to have that conversation of what can and will go bad and how you're going to remedy that situation.